The rain poured relentlessly as billionaire Chukwudi Ezeh stepped out of his car, expecting to surprise the mother he hadn't seen in months. Instead, he froze. Beneath a broken roadside shelter, an elderly woman sat shivering quietly, eating leftovers from a cracked plastic container. It was his own mother, Mama Chukwudi Ezeh. The mansion he had built for her stood only a few hundred meters away, its lights glowing warmly while she trembled in the storm. She begged him not to ask questions, but when Chukwudi noticed the bruises on her wrists, he realized someone had stolen far more than her home, and the truth would destroy everything he believed. If you're watching today, tell us where you're watching from and what your local time is. We'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoy emotional stories filled with hope, justice, and unforgettable twists, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss our next journey. The first light of dawn stretched across the skyline of Lagos as Chukwudi Ezeh's private jet landed after a 14-hour flight from London. Business magazines had spent the last week celebrating his latest achievement. His company had secured the largest renewable energy contract in West Africa, adding another milestone to a career that seemed almost impossible for a man who had grown up in a poor village in southeastern Nigeria. Investors admired him. Politicians sought his advice. Young entrepreneurs quoted his speeches. Yet none of those accomplishments occupied his thoughts as he stepped onto Nigerian soil. His mind was fixed on only one person, his mother, Mama Chukwudi Ezeh. It had been almost 6 months since he had last seen her in person. They spoke on the phone every week, but business obligations had kept him traveling across 3 continents. Each time they ended a call, she told him exactly the same thing. "Don't worry about me, my son. Just stay healthy." She never complained. She never asked for expensive gifts. She never mentioned loneliness. That was exactly who she had always been. As the black luxury SUV left the airport, Chukwudi rested his head against the window and watched Lagos slowly come alive. Traders arranged vegetables beside the road. School children hurried toward buses wearing neatly pressed uniforms. Mechanics opened their workshops while motorcycle riders weaved through traffic with practiced confidence. The city had changed over the years, but it still felt like home. His driver, Ibrahim Soul, glanced at him in the mirror. "Sir, should I inform Madam that you're coming?" Chukwudi smiled. "No, I want to surprise her." Ibrahim nodded. "She will be very happy." "I hope so." Chukwudi reached into the leather bag beside him and carefully removed a small velvet box. Inside was a gold pendant shaped like the African continent. On the back were engraved the words, "To the strongest woman I have ever known. Love always, Chukwudi." He smiled quietly before closing the box. His mother had spent most of her life sacrificing for him. After his father died unexpectedly, she refused to let poverty destroy her son's future. She worked on farms during planting season. She sold vegetables in crowded markets. She washed clothes for wealthier families whenever she could find work. There were nights when she pretended she had already eaten so that young Chukwudi could finish the last bowl of soup without feeling guilty. He had never forgotten those moments. Everything he owned belonged to her before it belonged to him. That was why years earlier he had built a beautiful mansion for her in one of Lagos's finest neighborhoods. He hired gardeners, cooks, nurses, security guards, and housekeepers, so she would never struggle again. He wanted her to enjoy the peaceful life she had earned. His phone suddenly vibrated. The message came from Obinna Okafor, his cousin. "Morning, brother. Hope your meetings are going well." Chukwudi smiled as he typed a short reply. "Meetings are over. I'm already back in Lagos." The response arrived almost instantly. "You're here already?" Before Chukwudi could answer again, the phone rang. He accepted the call. "My brother." Instead of excitement, there was a brief silence. "You didn't tell me you were coming today." I wanted to surprise everyone. I see. Another uncomfortable pause followed. Obinna finally laughed. The house isn't exactly ready. What do you mean? We've been making a few changes. My mother never mentioned anything. It happened recently. Chukwudi frowned. I don't care about renovations. I'll be there soon. You could stay at a hotel for today. That suggestion immediately caught his attention. My own house. It would just be easier. For whom? Obinna hesitated before answering. We'll talk when we meet. The call ended. Ibrahim noticed the expression on Chukwudi's face. Is everything all right, sir? I don't know. The rest of the journey passed in silence. Nearly 40 minutes later, the familiar iron gates of the Ezeh family estate appeared ahead. Tall palm trees lined the driveway beyond the entrance, while colorful flowers decorated the carefully maintained gardens. From a distance, everything looked perfect. Fresh paint covered the mansion walls. The lawns were neatly trimmed. Luxury vehicles filled the parking area. Yet something felt strangely different. Normally, security guards recognized Chukwudi's vehicle immediately. Today, they simply stared. One guard hurried inside a small security office instead of opening the gate. Another spoke urgently into a radio. Only after several long moments did the gate begin to open. A man Chukwudi had never seen before approached the SUV. Good morning. Good morning. May I know your name? Chukwudi blinked. I'm Chukwudi Ezeh. The man's face immediately changed. Oh, you didn't recognize me? I'm new, sir. Where is the head of security? He isn't available. Before Chukwudi could ask another question, a black SUV sped toward the entrance. Obinna climbed out quickly, smiling far too widely. My brother? They embraced briefly, but something felt wrong. Obinna's smile never reached his eyes. You really surprised us. I can see that. They walked toward the mansion together. Chukwudi looked around. Several gardeners stopped working the moment they noticed him. An elderly cleaner quickly lowered her head and disappeared behind the side building. Nobody smiled. Nobody welcomed him home. It was unlike anything he had experienced before. As they entered the spacious entrance hall, Chukwudi stopped walking. The room looked completely different. Modern furniture had replaced the wooden chairs his mother loved. Large, abstract paintings covered the walls. The old family photographs were gone, especially the portraits of his late father. He slowly turned toward Obinna. Where are father's pictures? Obinna answered casually. We redecorated. My mother approved this. Of course. Chukwudi said nothing. His mother treasured memories. She would never remove her husband's photographs. Never. He continued walking through the house. Everything looked expensive. Everything looked luxurious. Yet the warmth had disappeared. The house no longer felt lived in. No gospel music floated through the hallways. No smell of fresh soup came from the kitchen. No gentle humming from Mama Ngozi as she watered her favorite flowers. Only silence. Then, Chukwudi asked the question he had wanted to ask from the moment he entered. Where is my mother? Obinna answered almost immediately. She went out? So early. She likes morning walks. Chukwudi stared at him. My mother suffers from arthritis. She's been feeling better lately. I spoke to her 4 days ago. She never mentioned taking long walks. Obinna forced another smile. People change. At that moment, an older housekeeper stepped into the hallway carrying folded bed sheets. It was Adobe Nwosu. She had worked for the family for nearly 15 years. The instant she saw Chukwudi, tears filled her eyes. Welcome home, sir. It's good to see you again, Adobe. You too, sir. Where is my mother? The woman opened her mouth. Before she could answer, Obinna spoke firmly. Adobe, the upstairs rooms still need cleaning. She froze. For one brief second, her frightened eyes met Chukwudi's. I should get back to work. She hurried away without another word. Chukwudi watched her disappear upstairs. His instincts sharpened. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals by recognizing tiny changes in people's behavior. Fear, hesitation, forced smiles, avoided eye contact. He had just seen every one of those signs inside his own home. He turned slowly toward Obinna. I'm going to find my mother. Obinna immediately stepped in front of him. Brother, maybe you should wait until she comes back. No. Please. Chukwudi's voice became calm but firm. If everything is as normal as you claim, then there should be no reason to stop me. For the first time since they met that morning, Obinna had no answer. The silence between them said far more than words ever could. And deep inside, Chukwudi felt an unfamiliar fear beginning to grow. Something terrible had happened while he was away. Something everyone in this house already knew. Except him. Chukwudi walked past Obinna without another word. Brother, listen to me, Obinna called after him. Mama will be back soon. Chukwudi stopped at the front door, but did not turn around. If she's coming back soon, then tell me where she is. Obinna hesitated. I'm not exactly sure. That was enough. Chukwudi stepped outside his calm expression, hiding the storm building inside him. He had learned long ago that anger clouded judgment. Whether negotiating billion-dollar contracts or handling a crisis, he always relied on patience before action. This time would be no different. He climbed back into the SUV. Ibrahim. Yes, sir. Drive slowly around the neighborhood. The driver looked surprised. We're looking for Madam. Yes. The SUV rolled quietly through the peaceful streets surrounding the estate. It was a wealthy neighborhood filled with elegant homes, carefully trimmed gardens, and private security guards. Normally, Chukwudi would have admired the quiet beauty of the area. Instead, he watched every sidewalk, every corner, every small shop with growing unease. 20 minutes passed. Nothing. His phone remained silent. No call from his mother. No message. Only another text from Obinna. Please come back home. You're worrying everyone. Chukwudi ignored it. The vehicle turned onto an older road leading toward a small neighborhood market that had existed long before luxury mansions were built nearby. As they approached the market, Ibrahim suddenly slowed the vehicle. Sir? What is it? I think... The driver pointed toward a small roadside shelter made of rusted metal sheets. There. Chukwudi followed his finger. Time seemed to stop. An elderly woman sat alone on a worn wooden bench beneath the leaking shelter. Rainwater dripped steadily through broken holes in the roof. Her faded wrapper was damp around the edges, and an old gray shawl covered her shoulders. In her trembling hands was a small plastic container. She quietly ate spoonfuls of cold rice without looking up. Chukwudi's heart nearly stopped. Mama! Before Ibrahim could park completely, Chukwudi had already opened the door. He ran through the rain. Mama! The woman slowly lifted her head. For a moment, confusion filled her tired eyes. Then recognition. Chukwudi. The spoon slipped from her hand. My son. He knelt beside her without caring that rain soaked his expensive suit. What are you doing here? She immediately tried to smile. Oh, I just wanted some fresh air. He looked around. Fresh air. She was sitting beside a busy roadside market while rain poured from the sky. Nothing about this made sense. He gently held her hands. They were freezing. Her fingers, once strong from years of hard work, now trembled slightly. Mama, why are your clothes wet? I forgot my umbrella. You never forget your umbrella. She looked away. I'm getting old. Chukwudi studied her face carefully. She looked thinner, much thinner than she had 6 months earlier. The warm, healthy glow he remembered had faded. Dark circles surrounded her eyes. Her cheeks had become hollow. Even her smile seemed forced. His chest tightened. When did you last eat? She laughed softly. I'm eating now. Before this. Oh, I wasn't very hungry. He looked down at the plastic container. The rice was cold. There were only a few pieces of beans mixed inside. This was not food prepared by the chefs working at his mansion. This looked like a simple meal sold cheaply at the roadside. A middle-aged woman standing nearby hesitated before approaching. Excuse me. Chukwudi looked up. Yes, I know this woman. His mother's eyes widened. It's all right, the woman continued gently. I own the small food stall over there. She pointed toward a wooden kiosk a few meters away. Madame comes here almost every afternoon. Mama Ngozi quickly interrupted. That's enough. But the woman continued. She never asks for anything. She always says she's waiting for someone. Chukwudi stared at his mother. Waiting for who? Mama Ngozi smiled sadly. For you. Silence filled the air. The market noises seemed to disappear. Chukwudi felt as though something inside him had shattered. You've been coming here? She nodded quietly. Sometimes. How long? She avoided the question. I like watching people. The food vendor looked uncomfortable. I'm sorry, madam. Mama Ngozi reached for her hand. You've already done enough. The woman sighed. I couldn't watch her stay hungry. Chukwudi slowly turned toward the vendor. What do you mean? The woman hesitated. I shouldn't interfere in family matters. I need the truth. She looked toward Mama Ngozi silently, asking permission. His mother gently shook her head. It's all right. The vendor finally spoke. Many days she comes with no money. Chukwudi frowned. No money? I always tell her she doesn't have to pay. His mother's eyes filled with embarrassment. I never wanted charity. The vendor smiled kindly. It isn't charity. She looked at Chukwudi. She insists on washing my tables after eating. Chukwudi felt his throat tighten. My mother. The woman nodded. She sweeps the front of my stall before she leaves. He could barely breathe. The woman who once worked endlessly so he could escape poverty, the woman whose sacrifices had built his future, was now cleaning tables for a plate of leftover rice. He stood slowly. This cannot be true. Mama Ngozi immediately reached for his arm. Please. He looked down at her. Come home. I will. Now. She hesitated. I don't want trouble. What trouble? Her lips trembled. There has already been enough. Chukwudi crouched beside her again. Mama? She finally met his eyes. I built that house for you. I know. It belongs to you. I know. Then why are you sitting here in the rain? For several seconds, she said nothing. Only the sound of falling rain surrounded them. Finally, she whispered, Some things are easier to endure than to explain. Those words frightened him more than anything else. She had never spoken like that before. Never. He carefully wrapped his jacket around her shoulders. You are coming with me. She looked toward the mansion in the distance. I don't think... You don't have to think about anyone else. He gently helped her stand. As she rose, she suddenly winced. Mama. I'm all right? No. He noticed she was placing almost no weight on her left leg. When did this happen? I slipped. Where? At home. Did you see a doctor? She nodded too quickly. Yes. What did the doctor say? She couldn't answer, because there had been no doctor. He understood immediately. His mother had lied to protect someone. Again. As Ibrahim hurried over to help, Chukwudi noticed something else. The sleeve of Mama Ngozi's blouse had slipped slightly. A dark bruise circled her wrist, not one caused by a simple fall. It looked as though someone had gripped her arm with terrifying force. His heartbeat quickened. He gently lifted the fabric. "Mama." She immediately pulled the sleeve back down. "It's nothing." "Who did this?" "No one." "Don't lie to me." She forced another weak smile. "Old skin bruises easily." He wanted to believe her, but he couldn't. Then another detail caught his attention. His father's wedding ring. She had worn it every single day since the funeral. It was gone. He looked at her left hand. The finger where it had rested for more than 30 years was now empty. His voice became almost a whisper. "Mama." She slowly hid her hand behind her wrapper. "Where is father's ring?" Her eyes filled with tears. For the first time since he had found her, she could no longer force a smile. Instead, she lowered her head. "I lost it." Chukwudi knew immediately that this too was another lie. Because Mama Ngozi had once told him only death could separate her from that ring. Now it had disappeared. The bruises, the hunger, the fear, the missing wedding ring. None of it was an accident. As Chukwudi helped his mother into the SUV, one silent promise echoed through his mind. Whoever had reduced the strongest woman he had ever known to this broken, frightened state would soon discover that they had not only betrayed an elderly mother. They had awakened a son who would never stop searching until every hidden truth came into the light. The drive back toward the Ezeh estate was almost silent. Rain tapped gently against the windows, while Lagos continued its busy morning beyond the glass. Inside the SUV, however, the atmosphere was heavy. Chukwudi sat beside his mother instead of taking his usual seat in the front. He held her frail hand carefully, afraid that if he loosened his grip, she might disappear again. Mama Ngozi looked out the window without speaking. Every few minutes, she forced a faint smile, as though trying to convince her son that everything was fine. It only worried him more. When they reached the mansion gates, the security guards immediately opened them. Their nervous expressions confirmed what Chukwudi had already begun to suspect. News of him finding his mother had clearly reached the house before they arrived. The SUV stopped in front of the entrance. Before anyone could open her door, Mama Ngozi quietly touched her son's arm. "My son." "Yes, Mama. Please don't be angry." He looked at her in disbelief. "After everything I've seen today, how can I not be? I don't want this family destroyed." Chukwudi lowered his voice. "If someone has been hurting you, then the family was already broken long before I came home." She looked away. "I just want peace." He gently helped her out of the vehicle. The front door opened before they reached it. Obinna Okafor stood there pretending to be relieved. "Auntie, we've been looking everywhere." Mama Ngozi answered softly. "I only went for a walk." Obinna nodded quickly. "Exactly. I told Chukwudi there was nothing to worry about." Chukwudi stared at him without responding. The silence made Obinna increasingly uncomfortable. Inside the house, several servants gathered in the hallway. Some smiled nervously. Others avoided looking at Mama Ngozi altogether. Chukwudi noticed something else. Nobody rushed to help his mother. Nobody asked whether she was cold after sitting in the rain. The woman who owned this house had returned, yet everyone behaved as though she were merely another visitor. That realization angered him even more. He guided his mother toward the dining room. "Let's have breakfast." Mama Ngozi immediately shook her head. "I'm not hungry." "You barely ate anything." "I'm fine." "You are not." His voice remained calm, but there was unmistakable firmness behind it. Within minutes, the household cook brought breakfast to the large dining table. Fresh bread, eggs, fruit, hot tea. Everything looked perfect. Yet, Mama Ngozi barely touched her food. Instead, she quietly broke a small piece of bread into tiny pieces. The habit instantly brought back painful memories. When Chukwudi was a child, she always broke bread that way, so it would appear she had eaten more than she actually had. She was doing it again. Without realizing it, his appetite disappeared. Obinna sat across the table trying to maintain a casual conversation. "So, how was London?" "Fine. And the new project?" "Successful." "That's good." Another silence followed. Finally, Chukwudi placed his cup down. "I have a question." Obinna forced another smile. "Of course." "Why was my mother eating in the rain?" The room froze. Even the servants stopped moving. Obinna laughed awkwardly. "You misunderstood." "Did I?" "She enjoys visiting the market. In the rain. She has always been independent." Chukwudi looked directly into his eyes. "She had no umbrella." Obinna hesitated. Perhaps she forgot. She had almost no money. Auntie doesn't like carrying cash. She was eating food given to her by a market vendor. No one spoke. The silence stretched painfully. Finally, Obinna shrugged. Sometimes older people make unusual decisions. Before Chukwudi could respond, Mama Ngozi gently placed her hand on his. "Enough." He turned toward her. "I don't want anyone arguing because of me." "Mama, please." Her tired eyes pleaded with him. Reluctantly, he nodded. Breakfast ended shortly afterward. Mama Ngozi excused herself and slowly walked toward her bedroom. Chukwudi watched until she disappeared upstairs. Only then did he notice that Adaobi Nwosu was standing quietly near the kitchen entrance. The longtime housekeeper looked frightened. She briefly met his eyes before lowering her head. A silent message passed between them. "Meet me. Not here. Not now." Chukwudi understood immediately. He waited patiently for nearly an hour, pretending to answer business emails, while everyone inside the mansion gradually returned to their daily routines. Around noon, he quietly walked into the garden. The estate stretched across several acres, filled with flowering trees and carefully maintained pathways. At the far end stood a small greenhouse that his mother loved. It was empty now, except for Adaobi. She stood beside a row of potted flowers, constantly looking over her shoulder. The moment Chukwudi approached, she whispered, "Please don't stay long." "You're afraid." She swallowed. "They're watching everyone." Adaobi glanced toward the mansion. "I shouldn't even be talking to you. You've known me since I was a young boy." Tears filled her eyes. "I know." "Then tell me the truth." She remained silent. "I found my mother eating leftovers in the rain." Adaobi closed her eyes. "I know." "You knew." "I've known for months." His heart pounded. "Months." She nodded slowly. "I wanted to tell you." "Why didn't you?" "They warned us." "Who warned you?" She looked toward the mansion again. "I can't say." "You can trust me." "I do trust you." "Then tell me." Her breathing became uneven. "If I speak." She stopped herself. "What will happen?" "My children." Chukwudi frowned. "What about them?" "They threatened to make sure I never worked again." He stared at her. "They threatened your family." She nodded. "I have 2 daughters in university." A tear rolled down her cheek. "I couldn't risk losing everything." For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Chukwudi realized the fear inside this house ran much deeper than he had imagined. Someone wasn't simply mistreating his mother. Someone was controlling everyone through intimidation. Finally, Adaobi took a folded envelope from inside her apron. Her hands trembled. "I've kept this hidden." "What is it?" "I don't know." She handed it to him. Madam asked me to protect it. He carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single handwritten note. The handwriting belonged to his mother. If anything happens to me, never stop searching for the truth. His chest tightened. When did she write this? About 3 months ago. Why? She never explained. He looked back at the note. His mother had expected something, perhaps even feared it. Adobe. Yes. I need everything you know. She shook her head. I can't tell you everything. Why not? Because I haven't seen everything. What have you seen? She hesitated once more. Then she leaned closer. I've seen Madam forced to sleep outside her own room. Chukwudi's eyes widened. What? Sometimes the bedroom door would be locked. His hands clenched. Who locked it? I never saw. But I heard voices. Whose voices? She looked around once again. I can't be certain. You can tell me. I heard Master Obina arguing with someone several nights. What were they arguing about? Money. The word echoed inside Chukwudi's mind. Money. I also heard Madame crying. His breathing slowed. His anger did not explode. Instead, it became colder, more controlled, more dangerous. Anything else? Adobe nodded. Madame kept asking for her documents. What documents? I don't know. Did she ever find them? No. She wiped another tear from her face. After that, she stopped asking. At that very moment, footsteps echoed from the pathway outside the greenhouse. Adobe's face turned pale. Someone's coming. She quickly stepped away and picked up a watering can. Moments later, Obina appeared. He smiled warmly, but his eyes immediately moved from Adobe to Chukwudi. There you are. Chukwudi calmly folded the handwritten note into his pocket. We were just talking about the flowers. Obina looked at Adobe. Weren't we? The frightened housekeeper nodded immediately. Yes, sir. Obina smiled again. But Chukwudi noticed something chilling. His cousin wasn't surprised to find them together. It was almost as if someone had informed him exactly where Chukwudi was. As they walked back toward the mansion, Chukwudi quietly looked around the estate. Security cameras covered nearly every corner. Guards stood at every entrance. Employees watched one another before speaking. The house resembled less of a family home, and more of a place where everyone lived in fear. He slipped his hand into his pocket and touched the folded note from his mother once again. One sentence repeated itself inside his mind. Never stop searching for the truth. For the first time since returning to Nigeria, Chukwudi realized this was no longer simply about discovering why his mother had been eating in the rain. Someone had carefully built an entire system of silence around her, and he had just found the first crack in that wall. That evening, the Ezeh mansion looked as elegant as ever. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the dining hall. Soft instrumental music floated through the corridors. The long mahogany table was covered with carefully prepared dishes that would have impressed the guests of any five-star hotel. To an outsider, the family appeared to be enjoying another peaceful evening. Only the people sitting around the table knew otherwise. Chukwudi watched every movement without appearing suspicious. Years of negotiating international business deals had taught him one important lesson. People often revealed more through ordinary habits than through direct questioning. Obina laughed a little too loudly. Ifeanyi Okoye, the estate manager, spoke only when necessary. The servants avoided making eye contact, and Mama Ngozi barely touched her food. Every detail strengthened the uneasy feeling growing inside Chukwudi. After dinner, Mama Ngozi excused herself early. I'm tired, she said gently. I'll walk you upstairs, Chukwudi offered. She smiled warmly. You've always taken care of me. I should have done it sooner. She squeezed his hand before slowly climbing the staircase. Chukwudi waited until she disappeared into her room before returning downstairs. Obinna was standing near the living room window. "A walk," Obinna suggested. Chukwudi nodded. The two cousins stepped outside into the quiet garden. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Finally, Obinna broke the silence. "You don't trust me anymore." Chukwudi answered honestly. "I don't know what to believe." Obinna sighed. "I know today looked strange. It looked much worse than strange. I've been doing my best. My mother was eating leftovers beside a roadside market." Obinna rubbed his forehead. "You don't understand elderly people." "No, you've been away too long." "I spoke to her every week. Phone calls aren't the same as living with someone." Chukwudi remained silent. Obinna continued. "She has become stubborn." "In what way?" "She refuses help." "That isn't true." "She walks out without telling anyone." "She has never behaved like that before." "People change with age." The answer sounded prepared, almost rehearsed. Chukwudi looked toward the mansion. "I'll ask her myself." Obinna immediately replied, "You'll only upset her." That sentence lingered in Chukwudi's mind. Why was everyone so determined to stop him from speaking privately with his own mother? Before he could continue, Ifeanyi Okoye walked into the garden. The estate manager was in his late 50s, always dressed neatly and known for his calm, professional manner. "Good evening, sir." "Good evening. I've prepared tomorrow's financial reports." Chukwudi accepted the folder without opening it. "Thank you." Ifeanyi hesitated. "If there's anything concerning Madam—" Chukwudi looked directly at him. "Go on." "I hope you'll understand she has become forgetful." Those words immediately caught his attention. Forgetful. Sometimes she imagines things. Such as, she occasionally believes people are taking her belongings. Chukwudi's expression hardened. "Has a doctor diagnosed this?" "No." "Then why would you say that?" Ifeanyi forced a polite smile. "We've simply noticed changes." Chukwudi said nothing. Instead, he quietly watched both men. Obinna, Ifeanyi. Neither looked comfortable. Neither answered questions directly. Both kept returning to the same idea, that Mama Ngozi could no longer be trusted. The conversation ended shortly afterward. Back inside the mansion, Chukwudi entered the study his father had once used. Most of the furniture remained unchanged. A large wooden desk stood near the window. Bookshelves covered one wall. Family awards filled another. He sat down and opened the financial folder Ifeanyi had given him. At first glance, everything appeared normal. Maintenance expenses, employee salaries, charitable donations, utility bills, nothing unusual. But Chukwudi had spent years reviewing financial statements worth hundreds of millions of dollars. His eyes naturally searched for patterns. Within 20 minutes, he noticed something odd. Several maintenance payments had nearly tripled during the previous year. Landscape renovation, roof repairs, interior decoration, security upgrades. The numbers seemed unusually high. He compared the dates. Many of those expenses occurred while he was overseas. He continued reading. Another irregularity appeared. Large monthly transfers had been approved under a category labeled Special Family Care. The recipient company carried a name he didn't recognize, Golden Horizon Services. The amount transferred each month exceeded what many Nigerian families earned in several years. Yet there was no explanation of the services provided. He leaned back in his chair. Something wasn't right. Just then, someone knocked softly. "Come in." Ibrahim entered. "Sir." "What is it?" "I thought you should know something." Chukwudi closed the folder. "Go ahead." "When I drove Madame home last Christmas, He stopped. You drove her? Yes. You never told me. I didn't think it mattered. What happened? Ibrahim looked uneasy. I picked her up from church, and she asked me to stop at a small pharmacy. Why? She wanted medicine. For arthritis. So, I assumed. Did she buy it? No. Why not? She didn't have enough money. Chukwudi stared at him. My mother. I paid for it. His voice remained calm. Why didn't anyone at home pay? I don't know. Did you tell anyone? I mentioned it to Mr. Ifeanyi. What did he say? He told me never to discuss family finances again. The room became silent. Ibrahim lowered his eyes. I almost lost my job. Chukwudi slowly stood. Thank you for telling me. I've wanted to tell you for months. Why now? The driver answered quietly. Because today I saw your mother eating in the rain. After Ibrahim left, Chukwudi walked toward the window. Outside, darkness covered the estate. Lights glowed along the pathways. Security guards continued their patrols. Everything looked peaceful, yet every hour revealed another hidden piece of the puzzle. His mother had lacked money. She had needed medicine. She had been eating food from strangers. Someone wanted everyone to believe she was becoming mentally unstable. Now, mysterious companies were receiving enormous payments from family accounts. Too many coincidences. His phone suddenly vibrated. It was an alert from the bank. As company chairman, Chukwudi still received notifications whenever unusually large transactions involved his family's trust. A payment had been scheduled for the following morning. Recipient Golden Horizon Services. Amount N185,000,000. His eyes narrowed. He had never approved this. He immediately called the bank's senior manager. Good evening, Mr. Ezeh. I need one favor. Of course. I want that transfer delayed. There may be questions. Let them ask. I understand. The manager paused. Would you like us to notify the estate office? No. Very well. The call ended. Someone inside the mansion expected nearly 200 million naira to disappear by morning, and that someone still believed Chukwudi knew nothing. He opened his laptop and began searching public corporate records. Golden Horizon Services. The company existed, but it had been registered only 18 months earlier. Its listed business activities were vague: consulting, property maintenance, administrative support. Nothing unusual. Then he reached the ownership records. His heartbeat slowed. The company's principal shareholder was hidden behind another holding company, but one name appeared among the directors. A familiar name. Obinna Okafor, not as majority owner, not officially, but as a board member. Chukwudi stared at the screen. His cousin had never mentioned owning any business connected to the estate. Why keep it secret? Why receive enormous payments from family accounts? Why convince everyone that Mama Ngozi was losing her memory? Questions multiplied faster than answers. Then another detail caught his attention. One document referenced archived security footage from the estate, footage required for renovation verification. He frowned. Security footage, the same footage that supposedly no longer existed. If payments had been made using those recordings as evidence, then perhaps the recordings had never truly disappeared. Someone had lied. And somewhere inside the mansion, or beyond it, the truth might still be waiting. Chukwudi barely slept that night. Long after the mansion had fallen silent, he remained inside his father's old study, reviewing financial statements, payment records, and corporate documents. Every page seemed to point toward the same conclusion. Someone had been moving enormous amounts of money through companies connected to the family estate, and every suspicious transaction had taken place while he was working overseas. But financial fraud alone could never explain what he had seen that morning. His mother had been hungry. She had been frightened. She had hidden bruises beneath her sleeves. Money could be stolen. Property could be recovered. A mother's dignity could not. Just before dawn, Chukwudi closed the last file and looked out the window. The first rays of sunlight spread across the gardens. Normally, Mama Ngozi would already be outside watering her flowers or feeding the birds that visited the estate every morning. Today, the garden remained empty. He quietly left the study and walked upstairs. When he reached his mother's bedroom, he knocked gently. "Mama." A soft voice answered. "Come in." He opened the door. The room surprised him immediately. It was far smaller than he remembered. The luxurious master suite he had designed specifically for his mother was located on the opposite side of the mansion. This room looked more like a guest bedroom. The furniture was old. The curtains were faded. A small wooden wardrobe stood against one wall, and only a few family photographs decorated the shelves. Chukwudi looked around in confusion. "Mama, why are you staying here?" She folded the blanket neatly before answering. "This room is enough for me." "But where is your bedroom?" She smiled gently. "I wanted something smaller." He knew instantly that the answer wasn't true. Years earlier, his mother had personally helped choose every detail of the master suite. It overlooked the gardens she loved and included a private sitting room where she often read her Bible. She would never abandon it willingly. "Can I see the other room?" Her smile faded slightly. "There is no need. I built it for you." "I know." "Then please." She hesitated before slowly nodding. Together they walked down the hallway until they reached the large double doors of the master suite. Before Chukwudi could turn the handle, he noticed something strange. The lock had been changed. "This wasn't here before." Mama Ngozi lowered her eyes. "No." He tried the handle. Locked. He turned toward her. "Where's the key?" "I don't have it." His heart skipped a beat. "You don't?" She slowly shook her head. "I gave it away." "To whom?" She didn't answer. At that moment, footsteps echoed behind them. Obina appeared at the end of the hallway. "Oh, you're both awake." Chukwudi looked directly at him. "Where's the key to my mother's room?" Obina remained calm. "We're renovating it." "For how long?" "Several months." Chukwudi frowned. "Several months. The ceiling developed water damage. I'd like to see it." "It isn't safe." Without waiting for permission, Chukwudi examined the door more carefully. No construction signs, no dust, no smell of fresh paint. Nothing suggested ongoing renovations. He gently touched the handle. It was clean, used recently, very recently. He looked back at Obina. "When was the last contractor here?" Obina hesitated. "I don't remember." "You supervised the renovation." "I handled many things." "You forgot the contractors." Obina forced a smile. "I'll check the records later." Chukwudi said nothing. Instead, he quietly memorized every detail before following his mother downstairs. Breakfast was quieter than the previous day. Mama Ngozi ate only a small bowl of porridge. Obina kept checking his phone. Ifeanyi arrived late and looked unusually tense. Halfway through the meal, Chukwudi's own phone vibrated. It was the bank manager. He excused himself and stepped onto the terrace before answering. "Good morning." "Good morning, Mr. Ezeh. What happened?" "The transfer you asked us to delay created some confusion." "Who called?" "There were 2 calls." "From whom?" "The first came from Mr. Ifeanyi Okoye." Chukwudi remained silent. "And the second?" "A man identified himself as Mr. Obina Okafor." His suspicion deepened. "What did they say?" "They insisted the payment was urgent." "Did either of them know I stopped it?" "We didn't tell them." "Good." The manager lowered his voice. Mr. Ezeh, there's something else. I'm listening. Yesterday wasn't the first transfer. I know. We reviewed older transactions, and several payments carried digital approval signatures under your name. Chukwudi's expression hardened. I never signed them. That's why I called. You believe they were forged. We can't confirm that yet. But the signatures don't match your recent authorization records. For several seconds, Chukwudi said nothing. Someone hadn't merely stolen money. Someone had impersonated him. I'll handle it personally. After ending the call, he remained on the terrace for several moments. Forgery, financial fraud, his mother's unexplained suffering. The pieces were slowly connecting, but he still lacked proof. As he returned inside, he heard voices coming from the library. The door was slightly open. Obina and Ifeanyi were speaking in low tones. The payment didn't go through. I noticed. Did the bank give a reason? No. What if he finds out? He won't. Chukwudi stopped outside the door. Every instinct told him to keep listening. Then another voice entered the room. It belonged to Musa Bello, the head security guard. Sir. What is it? Obina asked. The old woman hasn't left the house today. There was a brief silence. Good. And Mr. Chukwudi, we'll keep watching him. Chukwudi's breathing slowed. Watching him. Why would anyone need to monitor the owner of the estate? He quietly stepped away before they noticed him. His pulse remained steady, but his mind raced. They weren't simply hiding something. They were coordinating their actions. Minutes later, he found Ibrahim washing the SUV. I need your help. Anything, sir. How many security cameras are still operating? Ibrahim looked around before answering. Almost all of them. I was told several were removed. They weren't. Are you certain? I drive past them every day. Where are the recordings stored? I'm not sure. But I know one thing. What? Every Monday a technician comes to collect backup drives. Chukwudi frowned. Every Monday? Yes. Today is Monday. Ibrahim nodded. He usually arrives around noon. Chukwudi checked his watch. It was only 10:30. That meant there was still time. If the recordings existed, they might contain exactly what he needed. Evidence. Not rumors. Not suspicions. Proof. He immediately walked toward the estate's small security office near the main gate. The younger guards stood up respectfully when they saw him. Good morning, sir. I need access to the surveillance system. One guard exchanged nervous glances with another. Mr. Obina instructed us that only he can authorize access. Chukwudi stared at him. I'm the owner. Yes, sir. So open it. Neither guard moved. Instead, one quietly reached for the office telephone. Before he could dial, Chukwudi calmly took the receiver from his hand and placed it back on the desk. Nobody needs permission for me to enter my own security room. The guards looked terrified. Slowly, one of them unlocked the door. Inside, rows of monitors displayed live images from every corner of the estate. The cameras had never been removed. They had been operating all along. Chukwudi slowly walked toward the recording console. If months of footage were still stored inside this system, then somewhere among those recordings lay the answer to what had really happened to Mama Ngozi while he was away. And for the first time since returning to Nigeria, he felt that the truth was no longer hiding beyond his reach. It was waiting inside this room. Chukwudi stood silently inside the security office, his eyes fixed on the wall of surveillance monitors. More than 30 live camera feeds displayed every important corner of the Ezeh estate. The front gate, the gardens, the garages, the servants' quarters, the main entrance, the rear courtyard. Even the narrow hallways inside the mansion appeared on separate screens, so the cameras had never been removed. Someone had lied to him. One of the younger security guards stood nervously near the doorway. "Sir?" Chukwudi turned. "Yes. The recordings are password protected." "Who knows the password?" The guard swallowed. "Mr. Ifeanyi." "And Mr. Obina." "No one else." The guard slowly shook his head. Chukwudi looked at the keyboard beneath the monitors. "Call Mr. Ifeanyi." The guard hesitated. Now. Within 5 minutes, Ifeanyi Okoye hurried into the office. Although he tried to appear calm, beads of sweat had already formed on his forehead. "You wanted to see me, sir." "I need access to the security recordings." "Of course." He forced a polite smile before walking toward the computer. "I'll open the system." His fingers moved across the keyboard. The login screen appeared. Username accepted. Password accepted. The surveillance archive finally opened. Chukwudi remained standing behind him. "Show me recordings from 3 months ago." Ifeanyi clicked through several folders. An error message suddenly appeared. "Archive unavailable." He frowned. "That's strange." "What happened?" "I don't know." He tried again. The same message appeared. "Archive unavailable." "The files may have been corrupted." Chukwudi studied his expression carefully. "Were they?" "I'm afraid so." "What about 2 months ago?" Ifeanyi searched again. "Nothing." "Last month?" Again, nothing. Only the previous 5 days remained available. Everything older had vanished. Chukwudi looked directly at him. "When did this happen?" "I wasn't aware there was a problem." "You're responsible for estate security?" "Yes." "And you never noticed months of recordings disappearing?" Ifeanyi opened his mouth, but no answer came. The room fell silent. Finally, Chukwudi spoke. "Who services this system?" "A technology company." "Name?" "Vision Secure Solutions." "Contact them." "Immediately." "Right now." Ifeanyi slowly reached for his phone. After a short conversation, he lowered it again. "The technician is unavailable." "When will he return?" "They don't know." Chukwudi nodded once. "I'll contact them myself." He walked out without another word. Outside, the morning sun had broken through the clouds left behind by yesterday's rain. Gardeners quietly trimmed hedges, while cleaners swept the driveway. At first glance, everything appeared peaceful. Yet, every employee he passed lowered their eyes. No one smiled. No one greeted him naturally. Fear lingered over the estate like an invisible fog. As he crossed the courtyard, an elderly gardener accidentally dropped a pair of pruning shears. The metal clattered loudly against the pavement. The man quickly bent to pick them up. "I'm sorry, sir." "It's all right." The gardener glanced around before whispering, "They're watching." Chukwudi frowned. "Who?" Before the old man could answer, another worker called his name from across the garden. He immediately walked away. Again, another conversation ended before it truly began. Back inside the mansion, Chukwudi found his mother sitting alone near the library window with her Bible resting on her lap. She looked peaceful, but only on the surface. He noticed that she kept glancing toward the hallway every few moments, almost as though expecting someone to interrupt them. He sat beside her. "How are you feeling today?" "I'm fine." "You've said that every time I've asked." She smiled softly. "And it's still true." He reached for her hand. "Mama." She looked at him. "I need you to trust me." "I do trust you." "Then tell me what's happening." She remained quiet. "I found missing financial records." No reaction. "I discovered the surveillance footage has disappeared." Her fingers tightened slightly around the Bible. "I also know someone has been using my name to authorize payments." She slowly closed the Bible. "My son." I'm listening. There are times when knowing the truth brings more pain than peace. I'll accept that pain. She looked into his eyes for a long moment. You've always been stubborn. I learned from you. For the first time that day, a genuine smile appeared on her face. It disappeared almost immediately. I don't want revenge. I want justice. They're different. I know. She gently touched his cheek. When your father died, I promised myself I would never allow hatred to live in this family. And has staying silent protected the family? Tears formed in her eyes. No. Has it protected you? She couldn't answer. Just then, footsteps echoed from the hallway. Obinna entered carrying several folders. Oh, there you are. His smile appeared perfectly rehearsed. I've been looking everywhere. What do you need? Chukwudi asked. I thought we could review next quarter's investment plans. I'll do it later. It won't take long. I'm spending time with my mother. Obinna glanced toward Mama Ngozi. Auntie probably wants to rest. Before she could respond, Chukwudi answered. She'll tell me if she wants me to leave. Obinna's smile stiffened. I didn't mean anything by it. I know. The atmosphere became painfully awkward. Finally, Obinna placed the folders on a nearby table. We'll talk this afternoon. After he left, Mama Ngozi sighed quietly. You shouldn't provoke him. Chukwudi turned to her. Why are you protecting him? She looked down. He wasn't always like this. What changed? I don't know. You must. Again, she chose silence. That afternoon, Chukwudi decided to leave the estate alone. Ignoring Obinna's suggestion to take security guards, he drove himself to Vision Secure Solutions, the company responsible for maintaining the surveillance system. The office occupied the second floor of a modest commercial building. A receptionist welcomed him politely. I'd like to speak with your operations manager. May I have your name? Chukwudi Ezeh. Her eyes widened immediately. One moment, sir. Minutes later, a middle-aged man introduced himself as Daniel Afolabi. Mr. Ezeh, it's an honor. I have a few questions. Of course. My estate's surveillance archives have disappeared. Daniel looked surprised. Disappeared? Yes. That shouldn't be possible. Why not? Our company automatically creates duplicate backups. Chukwudi leaned forward. Duplicate backups. Every installation includes an external archive. Where is it stored? Daniel frowned. According to our records. He turned toward his computer. The backups are delivered directly to the client every Monday. To whom? He searched for several moments, then stopped. That's strange. What? The delivery recipient changed 8 months ago. Changed to who? Daniel read the name slowly. Obinna Okafor. Chukwudi felt his heartbeat quicken. What about before that? The recipient was listed as Mama Ngozi Ezeh. So my mother originally received every backup. Yes. When did that stop? Daniel checked again. 8 months ago. Exactly the period during which everything inside the mansion had begun changing. Do you still have copies? Daniel hesitated. We're required to retain emergency duplicates for 1 year. Hope flickered inside Chukwudi. You have them? I believe so. I need every recording from the past 12 months. Daniel nodded. I'll prepare them. How long? Several hours. I'll wait. As Daniel disappeared into the archive room, Chukwudi slowly exhaled. For days he had been chasing fragments of truth, missing money, broken promises, frightened servants, his mother's unexplained suffering. Now, for the first time, he was about to obtain evidence that no one inside the mansion could deny. Whatever had happened while he was away, the cameras had seen it all, and before the sun set, Those silent witnesses might finally reveal the truth that everyone else had fought so desperately to hide. Daniel Afolabi returned nearly 40 minutes later, carrying a sealed storage case containing several encrypted hard drives. He placed them carefully on the conference table before sitting across from Chukwudi. "Mr. Ezeh, these are our emergency backup archives." Chukwudi looked at the case. "So the recordings still exist?" Daniel nodded. "Our company keeps duplicate copies for disaster recovery. We rarely need them, but company policy requires us to preserve them for 12 months. You've just answered a question that has been bothering me since yesterday." "What question?" "Someone at my estate insisted every recording older than 5 days had disappeared because of a system failure." Daniel frowned immediately. "That explanation doesn't make sense." "Why not? Even if the local recorder failed, these backups would still exist." "So someone knew they weren't really gone." Daniel hesitated. "I can't speak about anyone's intentions." "I understand." He slid one of the hard drives toward his computer. "Let's begin." Within minutes, the first archive opened. The recordings were arranged by date time and camera location. Daniel clicked on footage from 8 months earlier. The main gate appeared on the screen. Employees walked in and out as usual. Gardeners trimmed hedges. Delivery trucks entered the estate. Everything looked ordinary. "Skip ahead," Chukwudi said. The footage advanced several days at a time. Nothing unusual. Then Daniel paused. "This date seems important." The timestamp matched exactly 8 months earlier, the same week that the security backup recipient had changed from Mama Ngozi to Obina. The front gate camera showed a moving truck entering the estate. Workers carried furniture into the mansion. Chukwudi watched closely. "That's the day the house was redecorated." Daniel continued playing the recording. Several hours later, another camera showed movers carrying large frame portraits out of the mansion. Chukwudi leaned closer. His father's photographs, the same portraits that had disappeared from the walls. He frowned. "My mother would never have approved that." The next recording showed something even stranger. The movers carried furniture from the master bedroom into a storage container. Large wardrobes, a reading chair, bookshelves, everything belonging to Mama Ngozi. "What happened after that?" Chukwudi asked. Daniel continued the playback. The answer appeared almost immediately. Workers placed completely different furniture inside the room. Dark leather sofas, a large executive desk, modern artwork. The master bedroom was being transformed into something else entirely. "It doesn't even look like a bedroom anymore," Daniel observed. "No. It looks like a private office." Chukwudi's jaw tightened. Someone had taken his mother's room, without his knowledge, without his permission. He remained silent. "Continue." Daniel selected footage from the hallway outside the master suite. Late that evening, Mama Ngozi appeared on the screen, carrying a small travel bag. She stopped in front of the bedroom door. She tried to open it. Nothing happened. She knocked gently. No answer. After waiting several moments, she quietly turned away and walked toward the smaller guest room where Chukwudi had found her the previous morning. He felt a sharp pain in his chest. She had not chosen that room. She had been locked out of her own. Daniel looked at him. "I'm sorry." Chukwudi didn't respond. His eyes never left the screen. The next day's recording showed Mama Ngozi returning to the master suite once again. This time, Obina stood outside the door. Although there was no audio, their body language spoke clearly. She asked something. Obina shook his head. She pointed toward the room. He folded his arms. Finally, she lowered her head and walked away. The recording ended. Silence filled the office. Daniel quietly closed one window. "Would you like to continue?" Yes. He selected footage from 6 months earlier. This time the camera overlooked the dining room. Breakfast had just ended. Most of the servants cleared the table. Mama Ngozi remained seated alone. Several minutes later, Ifeanyi approached her carrying a folder. He placed papers in front of her. She slowly shook her head. He pointed repeatedly at the documents. She refused. Then Obinna entered. He joined the conversation. Neither man appeared physically aggressive, but together they continued insisting that she sign whatever document lay on the table. Eventually, she stood up and walked away. She never signed. Chukwudi leaned back slowly. They wanted something. Daniel nodded. It appears so. They've been pressuring her. Again, the footage continued. 3 weeks later, another recording showed the same dining room. This time, Mama Ngozi signed a document. Not willingly. Her shoulders slumped. She wiped tears from her face afterward. Obinna immediately collected the papers. He smiled. That smile made Chukwudi's stomach tighten. Can you zoom in? Daniel enlarged the image. Unfortunately, the document remained too blurry to read. I wish the resolution were higher. So do I. Still, the recording proved one thing. His mother had been pressured into signing something important. Daniel opened another archive. This camera overlooks the garage. The timestamp showed 5 months earlier. Mama Ngozi stood beside the family SUV speaking with Ibrahim. After a short conversation, she searched through her handbag. She looked distressed. Finally, Ibrahim removed his wallet. He handed her several banknotes. She thanked him with both hands. Chukwudi closed his eyes briefly. Ibrahim had told the truth. His mother had indeed borrowed money for medicine. No one inside the mansion had helped her. The footage moved forward. Another week. Another month. Again and again, Mama Ngozi left the estate carrying only a small cloth bag. Each time she returned alone. Sometimes she carried groceries. Sometimes medicine. Sometimes nothing at all. Never once did anyone accompany her. Never once did Obinna or Ifeanyi appear concerned. Then Daniel opened footage from just 3 weeks earlier. This one is from that rear garden. The recording began shortly after sunset. Mama Ngozi slowly watered her flowers. She looked peaceful. Moments later, Obinna walked toward her. They spoke. The conversation quickly became tense. Mama Ngozi pointed toward the house. Obinna responded sharply. She shook her head. He stepped closer. Then something happened that made Chukwudi grip the edge of the table. Obinna grabbed her wrist. Hard. She tried to pull away. He refused to let go for several long seconds. Finally, he released her. She stumbled backward before sitting heavily on a nearby bench. The bruise Chukwudi had seen beneath her sleeve. Now he knew exactly where it had come from. Daniel immediately paused the recording. I'm sorry. For several moments, Chukwudi couldn't speak. Anger surged through him unlike anything he had experienced in years. Not loud anger, not reckless anger. A quiet, controlled determination. The kind that never disappeared until justice had been done. He finally broke the silence. I need copies of everything. You'll have them. Every recording. Yes. No edits. None. Daniel began copying the files onto a secure encrypted drive. While the progress bar slowly advanced, Chukwudi stared through the office window. The city outside continued with its ordinary routine. People laughed, cars passed, businesses opened. No one could imagine that only a few kilometers away, an elderly widow had spent months suffering inside the very mansion her son had built to protect her. His phone suddenly rang. It was Adobe. He answered immediately. Yes, her voice shook. Sir, please come home. What happened? I can't explain over the phone. Is my mother all right? There was a long pause. I don't know for how much longer. The line went dead. Chukwudi looked at Daniel. I have to leave. The files will finish copying in another 10 minutes. I'll wait. Every second now felt painfully slow. For the first time, he no longer suspected that something terrible had happened. He knew it. The surveillance recordings had destroyed every lie. His mother had been isolated. She had been pressured. She had been humiliated. She had even been physically restrained. But one question remained unanswered. Why? What was so valuable that someone would torment the woman who had never harmed anyone? As the copying process finally reached 100%, Daniel handed him the encrypted drive. This contains everything. Chukwudi accepted it carefully. The truth was no longer hidden inside rumors or frightened whispers. It was now in his hands. And whatever awaited him back at the mansion, he would face it armed with evidence that no one could erase. Chukwudi gripped the encrypted drive tightly as he hurried out of Vision Secure Solutions. His mind replayed every image he had just watched. His mother being locked out of her own bedroom. Obinna forcing documents in front of her. The moment his cousin grabbed her wrist hard enough to leave bruises. None of those scenes could ever be explained away as misunderstandings. As soon as he reached his SUV, his phone rang again. It was Adeobi. He answered immediately. Adeobi, what's happening? Her voice was barely above a whisper. Please come quickly. Tell me what happened. They're moving things. What things? I can't say more. Before he could ask another question, the call ended. Chukwudi started the engine without hesitation. The drive back to the estate seemed longer than ever before. Every traffic light felt like an obstacle. Every slow-moving vehicle tested his patience. Yet he forced himself to remain calm. If Adobe had risked calling him, the situation inside the mansion must have become serious. 40 minutes later, the familiar gates appeared. This time, however, something was different. A large moving truck stood inside the compound near the side entrance. Several workers were loading wooden boxes into the back. Chukwudi parked immediately. The moment he stepped out, one of the workers approached. Good afternoon, sir. What are you loading? The man looked confused. We were hired to remove old storage items. Who hired you? Mr. Obinna. Chukwudi walked toward the truck. Each box carried the same handwritten label, Family Archives. His heartbeat quickened. Open one. The workers exchanged uncertain glances. Sir, we've been instructed not to. I own this estate. Without waiting for permission, Chukwudi lifted the lid of the nearest crate himself. Inside were dozens of framed family photographs, his father receiving a community award, his parents on their wedding day, pictures from Chukwudi's childhood, every photograph that had disappeared from the mansion walls. He opened another box, family albums, old letters, certificates, his late father's personal journals. Everything had been packed away, as though someone wanted to erase the family's history. Just then, Obinna hurried across the courtyard. You came back earlier than expected. Chukwudi slowly closed the crate. What is all this? Obinna glanced at the workers. We're reorganizing the storage rooms. Why are my parents' belongings being removed? They're not being removed. They're inside a moving truck. They're being transferred to another warehouse. Which warehouse? Obinna hesitated. The company warehouse? What company? Our property management office. Chukwudi looked directly at him. You've moved my mother's bedroom. Silence. You removed my father's photographs. More silence. You've taken family archives without informing me. Obinna finally sighed. I was trying to modernize the house. You don't erase a family to modernize a house. Several workers quietly stepped away, sensing the tension. Obina lowered his voice. Sir, this isn't the place. No, Chukwudi answered firmly. This is exactly the place. The courtyard had become completely silent. Even the gardeners had stopped working. Everyone watched from a distance. I want every box returned. Obinna folded his arms. The warehouse has already been scheduled. I wasn't asking. The workers looked uncertain. One finally spoke. Sir, whose instructions should we follow? Chukwudi answered without hesitation. Mine. No one moved. Obinna suddenly raised his voice. Continue loading. The workers froze between two opposing commands. For several uncomfortable seconds, nobody dared act. Then Chukwudi calmly reached into his wallet and removed his identification card. He held it up. My name is on the property deed. He looked at each worker individually. If a single box leaves this estate today without my permission, your company will answer directly to my legal department. The workers immediately stepped away from the truck. No one touched another box. Obinna clenched his jaw. You've embarrassed everyone. I've stopped evidence from disappearing. Obinna laughed bitterly. Evidence. Exactly. Before Obinna could respond, another voice interrupted. Sir. It was Musa Bello, the head security guard. He approached carefully. There's someone asking to see you. Who? A lawyer. Moments later, a silver sedan entered the driveway. An elderly gentleman wearing a dark gray suit stepped out carrying a leather briefcase. The moment Mama Ngozi saw him from the front veranda, she froze. Emeka. Chukwudi immediately recognized the name. Barrister Emeka Namdi, his father's closest friend, the family lawyer. He hurried toward them. Uncle Emeka. The older man embraced him warmly. My son. It's been too long. Far too long. His eyes shifted toward Mama Ngozi. How are you, my sister? She smiled weakly. I've seen better days. Those simple words carried more pain than any long explanation. The lawyer looked from Mama Ngozi to Obinna. His expression became noticeably serious. I believe it's time. Chukwudi frowned. Time for what? Barrister Emeka opened his briefcase. I've been waiting for your return. He removed a thick sealed envelope. I was instructed to give this to you personally. By whom? Your father. Silence fell instantly. My father died 20 years ago. Yes. Then what is this? A document he prepared shortly before his death. The elderly lawyer handed him the envelope. It's been in my custody ever since. Chukwudi carefully broke the seal. Inside were several legal documents. On top lay a handwritten letter addressed to him. He immediately recognized his father's handwriting. His hands trembled slightly as he began reading. My dear son, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. Take care of your mother. Protect her. Trust her judgment even when others ask you not to. Never allow anyone to separate this family from its history. Our greatest inheritance is not money. It is integrity. Chukwudi stopped reading for a moment. His throat tightened. The lawyer quietly continued. There are more documents. He turned the next page. It contained details of the Ezeh family trust, properties, investments, farmland, company shares, everything his father had left behind. Then Chukwudi noticed something unexpected. The trust listed only two permanent beneficiaries, Mama Ngozi Ezeh and Chukwudi Ezeh, no one else. He looked up. What about Obinna? Barrister Emeka answered calmly. He was never a beneficiary. Chukwudi frowned. Then why has he been managing everything? Because several years ago your mother gave him temporary administrative authority while you expanded your business overseas. Mama Ngozi lowered her eyes. I trusted him. The lawyer nodded sadly. Authority to manage. He emphasized each word carefully. Not authority to own. Chukwudi turned another page. Attached to the trust documents was a formal notice. Temporary authority expires immediately upon the return of Mr. Chukwudi Ezeh to Nigeria, effective immediately. Every administrative power reverted to him the moment his plane landed. Obinna's face slowly lost its color. Barrister Emeka calmly closed his briefcase. I came today because the trust office received unusual requests. What requests? Chukwudi asked. Applications to permanently transfer several family assets. To whom? The lawyer looked directly at Obinna. The documents named Mr. Obinna Okafor. The courtyard became completely silent. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Even the workers loading the truck stood frozen. Chukwudi slowly turned toward his cousin. Did you file those applications? Obinna remained silent. I asked you a question. Still nothing. Barrister Emeka quietly added one final sentence. The applications also carried what appeared to be your mother's signature. Mama Ngozi looked up immediately. I never signed those papers willingly. Every person standing in the courtyard heard her. For the first time, she had openly admitted it. The silence that followed was heavier than anything Chukwudi had experienced since coming home. His mother had finally spoken, and with those few words, the carefully built wall of lies had begun to collapse. The courtyard remained completely silent after Mama Ngozi's words. I never signed those papers willingly. No one spoke. The moving crew stood motionless beside the truck. The gardeners had abandoned their work. Even the security guards seemed unsure whether to remain at their posts or move closer. Every pair of eyes shifted between Mama Ngozi, Chukwudi, and Obinna. For Chukwudi, the sentence carried enormous weight. His mother had spent months protecting everyone else, even at the cost of her own suffering. She had defended Obinna repeatedly. She had hidden her bruises. She had denied her hunger. She had accepted humiliation without complaint. Now, for the first time, she had admitted that something had been terribly wrong. Chukwudi stepped closer to her. Mama. She looked at him with tears filling her eyes. I'm sorry. He gently shook his head. You have nothing to apologize for. I should have told you sooner. You were trying to protect the family. I thought things would get better. They didn't. She slowly nodded. No. Barrister Emeka remained calm as he placed the trust documents back into his briefcase. I believe we should continue this conversation inside. Chukwudi agreed. No one leaves the estate until we're finished. He turned toward the moving crew. Unload every box. The supervisor immediately nodded. Yes, sir. Without waiting for further instructions, the workers began carrying the family archives back into the mansion. Obinna watched in silence. His confident expression had disappeared completely. Inside the library, Chukwudi asked everyone except the four of them to leave. Only Chukwudi, Mama Ngozi, Obinna, Barrister Emeka. The heavy wooden doors closed. For several moments, nobody spoke. Finally, Chukwudi broke the silence. I want the truth. Obinna leaned back in his chair. You already believe I'm guilty. I believe the evidence. There are explanations. Then explain. Obinna sighed deeply. When you started traveling internationally, Auntie became overwhelmed. Mama Ngozi looked at him. I never said that. You struggled with managing such a large estate. I asked for help. You did. You offered to manage things temporarily. I did. That was all. Obinna lowered his eyes. I invested some of the estate's money. Without permission, I intended to grow the assets. Barrister Emeka interrupted. Trust administrators cannot invest family assets for personal benefit. I wasn't acting for personal benefit. Then why was your company receiving monthly payments? Obina looked toward the lawyer. They were management fees. No trust document authorizes such fees. Silence returned. Chukwudi reached into his briefcase and placed several printed bank records on the table. I've reviewed every transfer. Obina remained expressionless. Golden Horizon Services received hundreds of millions of naira. It handled renovations. What renovations? The house. You mean the renovation that moved my mother out of her own bedroom? Obina didn't answer. Chukwudi placed another document beside the first. This company lists you as a director. You already know that. You never disclosed it. I didn't think it mattered. It mattered. He calmly placed the encrypted drive beside the papers. I also recovered the surveillance footage. For the first time, genuine fear appeared in Obina's eyes. What footage? The footage you believed had disappeared. The room became silent again. Barrister Emeka slowly folded his hands. There were backups, Chukwudi nodded. 12 months of them. He looked directly at Obina. I've watched them. Obina swallowed. I don't know what you think you saw. I saw my mother locked out of her bedroom. No response. I saw her pressured to sign documents. Still nothing. I saw you grab her hard enough to leave bruises. Mama Ngozi lowered her head. The memory clearly pained her. Obina rubbed his forehead. It wasn't what it looked like. What was it? She refused to listen. So, you held her by force. I only wanted her attention. Barrister Emeka's voice became firm. That is not an acceptable explanation. Obina's patience finally began to crack. You weren't here. No, Chukwudi answered quietly. I wasn't. I carried this family while you traveled around the world. I trusted you too. I handled everything. You were supposed to manage it. I sacrificed years of my life. No one asked you to steal. I didn't steal. Then where is the money? Obina stood abruptly. I earned it. You earned family trust funds. I saved this estate. Chukwudi remained seated. You nearly destroyed it. The room fell silent once more. Mama Ngozi suddenly spoke. There is something both of you don't know. Everyone turned toward her. She took a slow breath before continuing. About a year ago, her voice trembled. Obina came to me with business problems. She looked at her nephew. He said he had invested heavily. Obina closed his eyes. He told me everything would collapse unless I helped him. Chukwudi listened carefully. He begged me to allow temporary loans from the family accounts. Barrister Emeka frowned. The trust forbids that. I didn't know. Mama Ngozi wiped away a tear. I believed he would repay everything. Obina finally spoke. I intended to. But you didn't. No. What happened? My business failed. Silence. I kept borrowing. Mama Ngozi continued. Each month he promised it would be the last. But it wasn't. She slowly shook her head. When I refused to sign more documents, her voice broke. Everything changed. Chukwudi reached for her hand. You don't have to continue. I do. She looked directly at her son. I owe you the truth. The room remained completely still. He stopped treating me like family. Her words came slowly. My bedroom was taken. My allowance disappeared. The staff were instructed not to help me. I was told to stop contacting you because your business was too important. Tears rolled freely down her cheeks. I believed him. Chukwudi's own eyes filled. Mama, I didn't want to become a burden. You never could. I thought if I endured quietly. She paused. One day, everything would return to normal. Barrister Emeka lowered his head respectfully. No one interrupted. No one could. After a long silence, Chukwudi finally looked at Obinna. "Did you tell the staff my mother was becoming forgetful?" Obinna answered quietly. "Yes." "Why?" "So people wouldn't question the changes. You made everyone believe she was confused. I had no choice." "You always had a choice." Obinna stared at the floor. "I was desperate." "Desperation doesn't excuse cruelty." Another long silence followed. Finally, Chukwudi asked the question that had haunted him since finding his mother in the rain. "Why didn't she have money?" Obinna hesitated. "I restricted access." "You what?" "I controlled household spending. You left my mother unable to buy medicine." "I thought..." "What?" "If she depended on me." He couldn't finish the sentence, because everyone already understood. Control. It had never been about management. It had been about making sure Mama Ngozi could no longer oppose him. Chukwudi slowly stood. His voice remained calm. "You betrayed the woman who raised us both." Obinna said nothing. "You betrayed my trust." Silence. "You betrayed my father's memory." Still nothing. "You even made my own mother feel like a stranger inside her own home." Obinna finally looked up. His confidence had vanished. Only exhaustion remained. "I never meant for it to go this far." Chukwudi answered quietly. "It already has." Just then, someone knocked urgently on the library door. Ibrahim entered without waiting for permission. "Sir?" "What is it?" "The bank called." Chukwudi frowned. "What happened?" "They've frozen another transfer." "Another one?" "Yes." "To Golden Horizon?" Ibrahim shook his head. "No." This one was being sent overseas. The room became silent. "How much?" Chukwudi asked. Ibrahim looked down at the notification in his hand. 480 million naira. Everyone turned toward Obinna, because only one question remained. If he had already admitted taking money from the family trust, who else had he been sending it to? A heavy silence settled over the library after Ibrahim announced the attempted transfer. 480 million naira. The amount echoed in everyone's mind. Chukwudi slowly turned toward Obinna. His expression remained calm, but anyone who knew him well could recognize the quiet determination behind his eyes. He had spent years leading multinational companies, and he had learned that the truth often appeared only after people believed they had already been caught. He spoke in a steady voice. "Who was supposed to receive that money?" Obinna didn't answer. "I asked you a question." Still nothing. Barrister Emeka adjusted his glasses before speaking. "Mr. Okafor refusing to answer will only make matters worse." Obinna rubbed both hands across his face. "It wasn't for me." "Then who was it for?" Chukwudi asked. "I can't tell you." "Can't?" "I gave my word." Chukwudi looked directly into his cousin's eyes. "You've already broken every promise that mattered." The words struck Obinna harder than shouting ever could. For a moment, he looked like the young man Chukwudi had grown up with, rather than the confident estate manager he had become. Finally, he spoke. "The account belongs to someone outside Nigeria." "Who?" "A business associate." "What business?" "My property investments." Barrister Emeka immediately shook his head. "The trust has no property investments outside its approved portfolio." Obinna looked away. "I know." "Then why send nearly 500 million naira overseas?" "I owed money." "To whom?" No answer came. Chukwudi walked to the large bookshelf beside the window and stood quietly for several moments before turning back. "I've spent the last 2 days asking questions." He looked at Obinna. I asked the servants. No response. I asked the driver. Silence. I asked the security company. Obina swallowed. I reviewed the bank records. Still nothing. And I watched the surveillance footage. The room fell silent again. There is only one thing I still don't understand. Obina slowly lifted his head. What? You had access to money? Yes. You controlled the estate? Yes. You even convinced people my mother was losing her memory. His voice became quieter. So why was she left hungry? The question hung in the air. It was simple, it was direct, and it was impossible to avoid. Obinna closed his eyes. I never told anyone to starve her. Did you give her money? No. Did you restore access to her accounts? No. Did you allow the staff to help her? Silence. Musa testified that everyone was instructed to report her movements. Still silence. Ibrahim paid for her medicine because she couldn't. Obinna lowered his head. I know. You knew? Yes. And you did nothing. His voice cracked. I told myself it was temporary. Mama Ngozi quietly wiped a tear from her cheek. I prayed for you every day. Obinna looked at her in disbelief. After everything I did? She nodded. You were still my nephew. He covered his face with both hands. I don't deserve that kindness. No, she answered softly. But kindness isn't earned. The room became quiet once more. After several moments, Barrister Emeka opened his briefcase again. There is another matter. Everyone looked toward him. I didn't come only because of the trust documents. He removed another sealed envelope. This arrived at my office last week. From whom? Chukwudi asked. It was delivered anonymously. He handed the envelope across the table. There was no return address. Chukwudi carefully opened it. Inside were photocopies of several legal forms, property transfer requests, corporate ownership declarations, loan agreements. At first glance, they appeared ordinary. Then he noticed something disturbing. Every document carried Mama Ngozi's signature, or what appeared to be her signature. He immediately placed the papers in front of his mother. Mama. She examined them carefully. Her hands began trembling. I signed this one. She pointed to the first page, but not willingly. She turned to the second. I never saw this. The third. This isn't mine. The fourth. I've never signed anything like this. Barrister Emeka nodded. That's what worried me. Chukwudi looked up. You suspected forgery. I suspected someone was mixing genuine signatures with fabricated ones. He removed a magnifying glass from his briefcase. Look closely. Chukwudi compared the signatures. At first, they looked identical. Then he noticed subtle differences. Letter spacing, pen pressure, the angle of the final stroke. Someone had practiced copying his mother's handwriting. Very carefully, very professionally. Barrister Emeka folded his hands. I've already asked an independent handwriting specialist for an opinion. And the preliminary findings suggest multiple signatures were not written by the same person. The library fell silent again. Forgery. Not suspicion anymore. Evidence. Obinna stared at the documents in disbelief. I didn't forge them. Chukwudi looked at him. Then who did? I don't know. You submitted them. I wasn't the one who prepared them. Who was? Obinna hesitated. My financial advisor. What is his name? Another pause. Victor Adewale. Where can we find him? He left Nigeria. When? 3 weeks ago. Barrister Emeka quietly made notes inside a leather notebook. I'll have investigators locate him. Obinna suddenly looked alarmed. You don't understand. Then explain. Victor handled everything. What does that mean? He prepared contracts. He arranged financing. He introduced investors. He always told me everything was legal. Chukwudi remained unconvinced. And you believed him? I wanted to. The answer sounded painfully honest, not because it excused anything, but because it revealed exactly how deeply Obinna had trapped himself. He had chosen convenience over responsibility. One compromise had led to another, until eventually he could no longer separate lies from truth. At that moment, Adaobi knocked gently before entering. "I'm sorry to interrupt." "What is it?" Chukwudi asked. She looked toward Mama Ngozi. "Madam, there's someone outside asking for you." "Who?" "A woman." "What woman?" "She says her name is Grace." Mama Ngozi frowned. "I don't know anyone named Grace." Adaobi nodded nervously. "She insists it's urgent." Chukwudi immediately stood. "I'll speak to her." They walked together toward the front entrance. A modestly dressed woman waited near the gate, carrying a worn handbag. The moment she saw Mama Ngozi, she smiled with relief. "Thank God!" Mama Ngozi looked confused. "I'm sorry. We met at the market." Recognition slowly appeared. "The food stall." Yes. It was the same woman who had fed Mama Ngozi when Chukwudi found her eating in the rain. "What happened?" Chukwudi asked. Grace reached into her handbag. "I came because someone visited my stall yesterday." "Who?" "A man." "What did he want?" "He offered me money." "Money." She nodded. "He told me never to mention seeing Madam." Chukwudi's expression hardened. "Did he give his name?" "No." "Would you recognize him?" "I think so." She carefully removed a small business card from her handbag. "He dropped this by accident." Chukwudi accepted it. The card bore only one name, Victor Ezeh, the very same financial advisor Obinna had mentioned only minutes earlier. Chukwudi slowly looked toward Barrister Emeka. Neither man spoke. They didn't need to. For the first time, another name had emerged at the center of the conspiracy. Obinna had clearly played a role, but it was becoming increasingly obvious that someone else had been directing events from behind the scenes. Someone who had encouraged the fraudulent transfers, someone connected to forged documents, someone who had even tried to silence a market vendor. If Victor Ezeh had truly fled the country, then finding him might reveal not only where the missing money had gone, but also why Mama Ngozi had become the target of a scheme far larger than anyone had imagined. The business card remained in Chukwudi's hand long after Grace finished speaking. Victor Ezeh. Until that moment, Victor had been nothing more than a name mentioned by Obinna. Now the connection had become real. The same man whose name appeared in suspicious financial dealings had also tried to silence the woman who had fed Mama Ngozi when she had no money. That could not be a coincidence. Chukwudi thanked Grace sincerely. "You've shown great courage by coming here." The woman smiled nervously. "I almost didn't." "Why?" "The man who visited my stall warned me to stay away from your family." "Were you threatened?" "He said people who interfere in rich families usually regret it." Barrister Emeka stepped forward. "Did he harm you?" "No." "But I was frightened." Mama Ngozi gently held Grace's hands. "You helped me when you didn't even know my name." Grace lowered her head modestly. "I only gave you food." "You gave me dignity." Those words brought tears to Grace's eyes. Chukwudi turned toward Ibrahim. "Please arrange transportation for Grace." "Yes, sir." "And make sure someone from our legal office takes her statement." Grace looked surprised. "I don't want any trouble." "You deserve protection," Chukwudi replied. "No one should be intimidated for telling the truth." After Grace left, Everyone returned to the library. The atmosphere had changed completely. What had begun as a family dispute now looked increasingly like an organized scheme involving forged documents, hidden financial transfers, and deliberate intimidation. Chukwudi placed Victor's business card on the table. "I want to know everything." He looked at Obinna. "When did you meet him?" Obinna stared at the card for several moments before answering. "About 2 years ago." "Where?" "At a business conference in Abuja." "What did he do?" "He introduced himself as an investment consultant." "And?" "He said he specialized in helping wealthy families grow their assets." Barrister Emeka frowned. "Did you verify his background?" "No." "Why not?" "He seemed successful." Chukwudi remained silent. Obinna continued. "He already knew who I was." "He knew about the Ezeh family." "Yes." "He said your company was expanding so quickly that the family estate needed more sophisticated financial management." Mama Ngozi quietly listened without interrupting. "He convinced me we were wasting valuable opportunities." "What opportunities?" Chukwudi asked. "He claimed there were profitable real estate projects that would double our investments." "And you believed him?" "At first, yes." "Did he invest his own money?" Obinna shook his head. "He only managed other people's investments." Barrister Emeka wrote several notes. "Did he ever meet Mama Ngozi?" Obinna hesitated. "Once." Mama Ngozi immediately looked up. "The tall man," Obinna nodded slowly. "You remember him?" "I remember refusing to sign his papers." The room fell silent again. Mama Ngozi closed her eyes briefly, searching her memory. He spoke politely. "What happened?" Chukwudi asked. "He brought several contracts." "Did you read them?" "I tried." "What did they say?" "I couldn't understand most of the legal language." She looked toward Barrister Emeka. "I asked if I could wait until our family lawyer returned." The lawyer nodded. "That was the correct decision." Mama Ngozi sighed sadly. The man became impatient. "What did he do?" "He said delaying the investment would cost the family millions." Obinna lowered his head. "I believed him," she continued. "I still refused. And then," he smiled. Her expression changed as the memory returned. "He told me I was old-fashioned." "What else?" "He said younger people understood modern business better." She glanced briefly at Obinna. "I thought he was only trying to persuade me. But after that visit..." She paused. Everything inside the house slowly changed. The timeline matched perfectly. Victor appeared. The pressure began. The bedroom disappeared. Money vanished. Chukwudi leaned back thoughtfully. He planned this from the beginning. No one argued. Just then, Ibrahim entered carrying a tablet. "Sir, what is it?" "I've received information from the bank." Chukwudi accepted the device. "The overseas transfer?" "Yes." "The destination account has been identified." He studied the screen carefully. The account belonged to a holding company registered in Dubai. Its listed director was not Victor Adewale, nor Obinna. Instead, another unfamiliar name appeared. Samuel Kazim. Barrister Emeka frowned. "I've heard that name before." "Where?" "He has been investigated in several commercial fraud cases." "Were charges filed?" "No." "Why not?" "Lack of evidence." Chukwudi placed the tablet on the table. "So Victor wasn't working alone?" Obinna slowly nodded. "I never met Samuel." "Victor handled everything." "Did Victor ever mention him?" "Only once." "What did he say?" "He called Samuel the silent partner." "The silent partner." "He said Samuel never appeared in public." Barrister Emeka closed his notebook. "This is becoming much larger than I expected." Chukwudi agreed. "So did I." The lawyer looked directly at him. I recommend reporting everything immediately. I will. But first, he looked toward his mother. I want to know whether there's anything else we've missed. Mama Ngozi remained quiet for a long moment. Finally, she stood. I forgot something. Everyone looked at her. She walked slowly toward the bookshelf in the corner of the library. Years earlier, Chukwudi had built the shelves himself alongside his late father. She reached behind a row of old books. Her fingers searched carefully until they found something hidden. She pulled out a small cloth package. I hid this. She placed it gently on the table. Inside lay several folded letters, tied together with faded blue ribbon. Chukwudi recognized the handwriting immediately. His father's. You kept these? She smiled sadly. They were private. Barrister Emeka looked surprised. I didn't know these existed. Neither did Chukwudi. His mother untied the ribbon. Your father wrote these during the final months of his illness. She handed the first letter to Chukwudi. He unfolded it carefully. The paper had yellowed with age. The handwriting remained strong. My dear Ngozi, if our son ever becomes successful, promise me one thing. Never allow wealth to replace character. Money attracts people with smiling faces and hidden intentions. Teach Chukwudi to judge actions more than words. He slowly lowered the letter. The room remained silent. Mama Ngozi handed him another. This one was shorter. If anyone ever pressures you to sign documents you do not understand, wait for Emeka. Trust patience more than urgency. Chukwudi closed his eyes briefly. His father had written those words decades earlier, yet they described exactly what had happened. Victor had demanded urgency. Mama Ngozi had wanted to wait. Everything his father feared had eventually come true. Barrister Emeka spoke softly. Your father understood people very well. Chukwudi nodded. He certainly did. Mama Ngozi carefully folded the letters again. I remembered them after seeing all of you talking. Why didn't you show them sooner? I thought I could solve everything quietly. She smiled weakly. I was wrong. Chukwudi gently embraced her. No, she looked at him. You were trying to protect us. I nearly lost everything. You saved something much more important. What? Our family's conscience. Tears filled her eyes again. Outside, thunder rolled faintly across the sky. A storm was approaching Lagos once more. As everyone remained gathered in the library, Ibrahim's phone suddenly rang. He answered quickly. Moments later, his expression changed dramatically. Sir, what happened? The police. What about them? They've just called. Why? Ibrahim looked directly at Chukwudi. They've located Victor Adewale. Every person in the room immediately stood. Where? Chukwudi asked. He was arrested less than an hour ago. The room fell completely silent. Arrested for what? Ibrahim read the message carefully. Attempting to leave the country using a false passport. Chukwudi exchanged a long look with Barrister Emeka. For days they had followed scattered clues. Missing money, forged signatures, hidden surveillance footage, threatened witnesses. Now, at last, the man connecting all those pieces had been found. And if Victor chose to speak, the final truth behind his mother's suffering might finally come into the light. The business card remained in Chukwudi's hand long after Grace finished speaking. Victor Adewale. Until that moment, Victor had been nothing more than a name mentioned by Obinna. Now the connection had become real. The same man whose name appeared in suspicious financial dealings had also tried to silence the woman who had fed Mama Ngozi when she had no money. That could not be a coincidence. Chukwudi thanked Grace sincerely. You've shown great courage by coming here. The woman smiled nervously. I almost didn't. Why, the man who visited my stall warned me to stay away from your family. Were you threatened? He said people who interfere in rich families usually regret it. Barrister Emeka stepped forward. Did he harm you? No. But I was frightened. Mama Ngozi gently held Grace's hands. You helped me when you didn't even know my name. Grace lowered her head modestly. I only gave you food. You gave me dignity. Those words brought tears to Grace's eyes. Chukwudi turned toward Ibrahim. Please arrange transportation for Grace. Yes, sir. And make sure someone from our legal office takes her statement. Grace looked surprised. I don't want any trouble. You deserve protection, Chukwudi replied. No one should be intimidated for telling the truth. After Grace left, everyone returned to the library. The atmosphere had changed completely. What had begun as a family dispute now looked increasingly like an organized scheme involving forged documents, hidden financial transfers, and deliberate intimidation. Chukwudi placed Victor's business card on the table. I want to know everything. He looked at Obinna. When did you meet him? Obinna stared at the card for several moments before answering. About 2 years ago. Where? At a business conference in Abuja. What did he do? He introduced himself as an investment consultant. And? He said he specialized in helping wealthy families grow their assets. Barrister Emeka frowned. Did you verify his background? No. Why not? He seemed successful. Chukwudi remained silent. Obinna continued. He already knew who I was. He knew about the Ezeh family. Yes. He said your company was expanding so quickly that the family estate needed more sophisticated financial management. Mama Ngozi quietly listened without interrupting. He convinced me we were wasting valuable opportunities. What opportunities? Chukwudi asked. He claimed there were profitable real estate projects that would double our investments. And you believed him? At first, yes. Did he invest his own money? Obinna shook his head. He only managed other people's investments. Barrister Emeka wrote several notes. Did he ever meet Mama Ngozi? Obinna hesitated. Once, Mama Ngozi immediately looked up. The tall man, Obinna nodded slowly. You remember him. I remember refusing to sign his papers. The room fell silent again. Mama Ngozi closed her eyes briefly, searching her memory. He spoke politely. What happened? Chukwudi asked. He brought several contracts. Did you read them? I tried. What did they say? I couldn't understand most of the legal language. She looked toward Barrister Emeka. I asked if I could wait until our family lawyer returned. The lawyer nodded. That was the correct decision. Mama Ngozi sighed sadly. The man became impatient. What did he do? He said delaying the investment would cost the family millions. Obinna lowered his head. I believed him. She continued. I still refused. And then, he smiled. Her expression changed as the memory returned. He told me I was old-fashioned. What else? He said younger people understood modern business better. She glanced briefly at Obinna. I thought he was only trying to persuade me. But, after that visit, she paused. Everything inside the house slowly changed. The timeline matched perfectly. Victor appeared. The pressure began. The bedroom disappeared. Money vanished. Chukwudi leaned back thoughtfully. He planned this from the beginning. No one argued. Just then, Ibrahim entered carrying a tablet. Sir, what is it? I've received information from the bank. Chukwudi accepted the device. The overseas transfer. Yes. The destination account has been identified. He studied the screen carefully. The account belonged to a holding company registered in Dubai. Its listed director was not Victor Adewale, nor Obina. Instead, another unfamiliar name appeared, Samuel Kazim. Barrister Emeka frowned. I've heard that name before. Where? He has been investigated in several commercial fraud cases. Were charges filed? No. Why not? Lack of evidence. Chukwudi placed the tablet on the table. So Victor wasn't working alone. Obina slowly nodded. I never met Samuel. Victor handled everything. Did Victor ever mention him? Only once. What did he say? He called Samuel the silent partner. The silent partner. He said Samuel never appeared in public. Barrister Emeka closed his notebook. This is becoming much larger than I expected. Chukwudi agreed. So did I. The lawyer looked directly at him. I recommend reporting everything immediately. I will. But first, he looked toward his mother. I want to know whether there's anything else we've missed. Mama Ngozi remained quiet for a long moment. Finally, she stood. I forgot something. Everyone looked at her. She walked slowly toward the bookshelf in the corner of the library. Years earlier, Chukwudi had built the shelves himself alongside his late father. She reached behind a row of old books. Her fingers searched carefully until they found something hidden. She pulled out a small cloth package. I hid this. She placed it gently on the table. Inside lay several folded letters, tied together with faded blue ribbon. Chukwudi recognized the handwriting immediately. His father's. You kept these. She smiled sadly. They were private. Barrister Emeka looked surprised. I didn't know these existed. Neither did Chukwudi. His mother untied the ribbon. Your father wrote these during the final months of his illness. She handed the first letter to Chukwudi. He unfolded it carefully. The paper had yellowed with age. The handwriting remained strong. My dear Ngozi, if our son ever becomes successful, promise me one thing. Never allow wealth to replace character. Money attracts people with smiling faces and hidden intentions. Teach Chukwudi to judge actions more than words. He slowly lowered the letter. The room remained silent. Mama Ngozi handed him another. This one was shorter. If anyone ever pressures you to sign documents you do not understand, wait for Emeka. Trust patience more than urgency. Chukwudi closed his eyes briefly. His father had written those words decades earlier. Yet they described exactly what had happened. Victor had demanded urgency. Mama Ngozi had wanted to wait. Everything his father feared had eventually come true. Barrister Emeka spoke softly. Your father understood people very well. Chukwudi nodded. He certainly did. Mama Ngozi carefully folded the letters again. I remembered them after seeing all of you talking. Why didn't you show them sooner? I thought I could solve everything quietly. She smiled weakly. I was wrong. Chukwudi gently embraced her. No, she looked at him. You were trying to protect us. I nearly lost everything. You saved something much more important. What? Our family's conscience. Tears filled her eyes again. Outside, thunder rolled faintly across the sky. A storm was approaching Lagos once more. As everyone remained gathered in the library, Ibrahim's phone suddenly rang. He answered quickly. Moments later, his expression changed dramatically. Sir! What happened? The police. What about them? They've just called. Why? Ibrahim looked directly at Chukwudi. They've located Victor Adewale. Every person in the room immediately stood. Where? Chukwudi asked. He was arrested less than an hour ago. The room fell completely silent. Arrested for what? Ibrahim read the message carefully, attempting to leave the country using a false passport. Chukwudi exchanged a long look with Barrister Emeka. For days they had followed scattered clues, missing money, forged signatures, hidden surveillance footage, threatened witnesses. Now at last the man connecting all those pieces had been found, and if Victor chose to speak, the final truth behind his mother's suffering might finally come into the light. The announcement of Victor Adewale's arrest changed everything. For the first time since Chukwudi had returned to Nigeria, the family was no longer chasing shadows. The man whose name had appeared on forged documents, suspicious investment schemes, and witness intimidation had been found alive and taken into police custody. Barrister Emeka immediately closed his briefcase. "We should leave now." Chukwudi nodded. "I agree." He turned toward his mother. "Mama, I want you to stay here with Adaobi." Mama Ngozi looked worried. "Will you be safe?" He smiled gently. "I'll be fine." She reached for his hand. "My son." "Yes. Whatever you discover, don't let hatred guide your decisions." He squeezed her hand softly. "I won't." Although anger still burned inside him, his mother's words reminded him of the values his parents had spent years teaching him. Justice was necessary, but revenge would never heal the family. Within 30 minutes, Chukwudi Barrister Emeka and 2 members of his legal team arrived at the Lagos State Police Command. A senior detective greeted them at the entrance. "Mr. Ezeh." "Yes." "I'm Superintendent Ibrahim Balogun." The officer shook hands with everyone before leading them toward an interview room. "Mr. Adewale has requested legal representation." Barrister Emeka nodded. "That is his right." "He also requested to speak with you." Chukwudi looked surprised. "With me? Specifically?" The detective opened the interview room door. Victor Adewale sat quietly at one side of the table. He looked very different from the confident businessman everyone had described. His expensive suit was wrinkled. Dark circles surrounded his eyes. His shoulders sagged with exhaustion. The moment he saw Chukwudi, he slowly stood. "I've been expecting you." Chukwudi remained standing. "You know why I'm here?" Victor nodded. "Yes. For months my mother suffered. I know. She was humiliated. I know. She was deprived of money." Victor lowered his head. "I know." Chukwudi's voice remained remarkably calm. "Then start talking." The detective activated the room's recording equipment. Victor took a long breath. "I never intended for any of this to happen." Barrister Emeka replied immediately. "Intentions don't erase actions." Victor nodded. "I understand." He folded his hands on the table. "Everything started as an investment proposal." He looked directly at Chukwudi. "When I met Obina, he was desperate to prove himself. He wanted success. He wanted recognition. He felt he would always live in your shadow." Chukwudi listened without interruption. "I offered him profitable investment opportunities. Were they real? Some were. And the others?" Victor hesitated. "They were designed to attract more money. So they were fraudulent." "Eventually, yes." The detective quietly continued taking notes. Victor sighed. "The first investments failed." "What happened then?" Chukwudi asked. Obina panicked. "He feared you would discover the losses. So you encouraged him to use family funds." Victor nodded. "I convinced him he could replace the money before anyone noticed." "But the losses grew." "Yes. Much larger." Victor looked ashamed. Every month required more money to cover previous losses. It became a cycle. Barrister Emeka leaned forward. "And Mama Ngozi?" Victor closed his eyes briefly. "She refused to sign additional authorizations." "So you pressured her?" "I persuaded her." "You forged documents." Victor remained silent. The detective spoke firmly. "Answer the question." "Yes." I arranged forged signatures. Chukwudi slowly exhaled. Finally, an admission. Victor continued. I hired specialists. I told myself no one would ever be harmed. He laughed bitterly. I was wrong. You certainly were, Barrister Emeka replied. Victor looked toward Chukwudi. I never instructed anyone to mistreat your mother. But you created the situation. Yes. Without the forged documents. He stopped speaking. There would have been no reason to isolate her. Victor nodded. I know. The detective asked another question. Who is Samuel Kazim? Victor looked genuinely frightened. For the first time during the interview, his confidence completely disappeared. I can't answer that. You can. I shouldn't. Why? Victor swallowed hard. Because Samuel isn't like Obina. What does that mean? He doesn't forgive mistakes. The detective remained calm. Is he the head of the operation? Victor slowly nodded. He financed everything. The fake investments. Yes. The shell companies. Yes. The overseas accounts. Yes. The room fell silent. Chukwudi finally understood. Obina had betrayed the family. Victor had organized the fraud. But another man had stood behind both of them. The true architect. Samuel Kazim. The detective asked quietly, Where is he now? Victor shook his head. I don't know. When did you last speak? 3 days ago. What did he say? Victor's voice dropped almost to a whisper. He told me to disappear. And if you refused? He said accidents happen. Another silence filled the room. The detective exchanged a brief look with Barrister Emeka. Victor was no longer simply a suspect. He had become a witness against a larger criminal organization. Chukwudi reached into his briefcase and placed several photographs on the table. One showed Mama Ngozi sitting in the rain with a plastic container of rice. Another showed the bruise around her wrist. A third was a still image from the surveillance footage. Victor stared at them, his eyes slowly filled with tears. I never saw this. No, Chukwudi answered quietly. You never cared to. Victor lowered his head. I thought she was living comfortably. You signed documents that took away her financial independence. I know. You threatened witnesses. I know. You destroyed an old woman's peace. Victor covered his face with both hands. I'm sorry. The apology hung in the air. It sounded sincere, but sincerity could not erase months of suffering. After a long silence, Chukwudi finally spoke. My mother may forgive you. Victor looked up hopefully. But forgiveness doesn't remove responsibility. The detective nodded. The law will determine that. Victor slowly accepted those words. I understand. The interview lasted nearly another hour. Victor described hidden bank accounts, fake consulting contracts, forged property transfers, and offshore companies created to hide stolen funds. Every answer strengthened the case. Every document connected another missing piece. When the questioning finally ended, Superintendent Balogun escorted Chukwudi and Barrister Emeka outside. This testimony changes everything. Will it be enough? Chukwudi asked. It gives us legal grounds to freeze additional assets. And Samuel? We've already issued an alert. Chukwudi nodded. For the first time since returning home, he felt that justice was moving forward, not quickly, but steadily. As they walked toward the parking area, Barrister Emeka's phone rang. He answered immediately. His expression changed. What happened? He listened carefully before ending the call. Chukwudi frowned. What is it? The lawyer looked directly at him. The High Court has approved emergency protection for the Ezeh family trust. That's good news. It is. But there's something else. What? The court clerk just informed me that someone attempted to file one final ownership transfer this morning. Chukwudi stared at him. Who signed it? He. Barrister Emeka slowly removed a printed copy from his briefcase. The signature at the bottom was unmistakable. Mama Ngozi Ezeh. But both men knew she had been inside the mansion all morning. She had never gone anywhere near the court, which meant only one thing. Even after Victor's arrest, someone was still forging her signature, and whoever that person was had not yet given up. Barrister Emeka handed the document to Chukwudi as they stood beside the courthouse parking area. Chukwudi examined the signature carefully. At first glance, it looked genuine. The flowing letters, the slight curve beneath the final stroke, even the spacing matched his mother's handwriting. But after comparing it with the authenticated documents he had reviewed earlier, he immediately noticed the same tiny differences that the handwriting expert had pointed out. The pressure on the pen was inconsistent. The final letter leaned slightly to the right. It was another forgery. He slowly folded the document. My mother never signed this. Barrister Emeka nodded. I agree. Superintendent Balogun stepped closer. Where was it submitted? At the High Court Registry early this morning, the lawyer replied. Who submitted it? The clerk said a representative delivered the documents. Did anyone identify him? He used authorization papers. The detective frowned. We'll need the security footage. For the second time in less than a week, surveillance cameras would become the key to uncovering the truth. Within an hour, the three men arrived at the courthouse administration office. The chief registrar welcomed them into a small conference room. We've already been informed about the investigation. Superintendent Balogun placed the forged document on the table. We need every record connected to this filing. The registrar immediately called a records officer. A large ledger was brought into the room together with electronic visitor logs. Barrister Emeka carefully reviewed the paperwork. The application was submitted at 9:17 this morning. Chukwudi checked his watch. At 9:17, Mama Ngozi had been inside the library, speaking with him, Grace, and the lawyer. She could not possibly have appeared at the courthouse. The registrar continued searching. There is also identification attached. He handed over a photocopy. Chukwudi stared at it. It was a copy of Mama Ngozi's national identity card. How did they obtain this? He asked quietly. Mama Ngozi had always kept her personal documents in a locked cabinet, unless someone inside the mansion had taken them. Superintendent Balogun turned toward the registrar. I'd like to review today's entrance cameras. Certainly. They moved into the courthouse security room. Several monitors displayed recordings from different entrances. The technician rewound the footage to the exact time listed in the registry. There, he said. A man wearing a dark cap entered carrying a leather document case. His face remained lowered most of the time. He approached the filing counter, handed over the documents, signed a receipt, and left less than 5 minutes later. Pause it, Chukwudi said. The technician enlarged the image. The man's face remained partially hidden. Can you sharpen it? I'll try. The technician adjusted the picture. Little by little, the image became clearer. The man's features finally appeared. Barrister Emeka immediately recognized him. I know him. Chukwudi looked surprised. Who is he? His name is Chukwudi Ezeh. What does he do? He worked for Victor Adewale. Superintendent Balogun quickly wrote the name down. Do you know where he lives? I know where his office used to be. The detective immediately contacted his team. Within minutes, officers were dispatched to the address. As they waited for updates, Chukwudi remained unusually quiet. Barrister Emeka noticed. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about my mother. The lawyer nodded. She endured all this alone. I built that house to protect her. And you believed she was safe. I never imagined she would need protection from people inside it. The words lingered between them. No amount of wealth could erase the guilt Chukwudi felt. He had trusted the wrong people. While he expanded his business across the world, the woman who had sacrificed everything for him had quietly lost her peace inside her own home. His phone rang. It was Adobe. He answered immediately. "How is Mama?" "She's all right." He sighed with relief. "But what is it?" "She asked me to give you something." "What?" "A small wooden box. I've never seen it before." "Don't open it." "I haven't. I'll be home soon." The call ended. Just then, Superintendent Balogun received a message from one of his officers. He read it quickly before looking up. "Collins Ezeh is gone." "Gone. The office is empty." "When did he leave?" "The landlord says early this morning." "So, he ran." "It appears so." The detective frowned. "But he left something behind." "What?" "A laptop." Chukwudi's attention sharpened immediately. "Was it recovered?" "Yes. Our cybercrime unit is examining it now." An hour later, they arrived at the cybercrime office. A forensic analyst connected the recovered laptop to a secure workstation. "It was password protected," she explained, "but we've gained access." "Did you find anything?" Superintendent Balogun asked. She nodded. "Quite a lot." Folders appeared across the screen. Contracts, financial spreadsheets, passport scans, company registrations. Then another folder caught everyone's attention. Ezeh Trust. The analyst opened it. Inside were dozens of scanned documents. Many carried forged signatures. Others contained financial calculations. One spreadsheet listed every payment taken from the family trust. Each transaction included 3 columns: requested by, approved by, final recipient. The first column frequently listed Obina. The second often contained Victor's initials. The third appeared repeatedly under one name: Samuel Kazim. Chukwudi slowly exhaled. The entire chain had finally become visible. Obina requested funds. Victor arranged the paperwork. Samuel received the money. The analyst opened another file. This one contained emails. Most discussed property transfers. One message, however, stood out. Its subject line read, "Remove the obstacle." Superintendent Balogun immediately leaned closer. "Open it." The analyst clicked. The email contained only one sentence. "The old woman must lose all legal authority before the son returns." The room fell completely silent. No one needed to ask who the old woman referred to. Mama Ngozi. Chukwudi stared at the screen. The conspiracy had never been merely financial. His mother's legal authority had been the only thing preventing complete control of the family trust. That was why she had been isolated, why she had been pressured, why forged signatures had appeared, why witnesses had been threatened. She had not been targeted because she was weak. She had been targeted because she stood between criminals and the family fortune. The analyst opened one final folder. There is also a draft letter. "To whom?" Barrister Emeka asked. "It isn't addressed." She opened the file. The first sentence appeared on the screen. "If Chukwudi Ezeh returns, unexpectedly activate the emergency transfer immediately." Everyone exchanged stunned looks. The emergency transfer. The very payment Chukwudi had stopped at the bank. If he had arrived only a day later, hundreds of millions more would have disappeared overseas. Superintendent Balogun closed the laptop. "I believe we now have enough evidence to issue additional arrest warrants." Barrister Emeka nodded. "So do I." Chukwudi looked toward the window. The sun was beginning to set over Lagos. For the first time since his return, he could finally see the entire picture. His mother had not been abandoned because of carelessness. She had been deliberately stripped of her authority so others could seize everything his parents had built. The truth had finally emerged. Now, only one step remained: justice. As the sun disappeared beyond the Lagos skyline, Chukwudi returned to the family estate with Barrister Emeka and Superintendent Balogun. Several police vehicles quietly entered through the front gate, but there was no chaos. Chukwudi had made one request before they arrived: no handcuffs unless absolutely necessary. He wanted justice to prevail, not humiliation. The servants gathered in the courtyard, whispering among themselves as the officers stepped out. For months they had lived in fear, never knowing whom they could trust. Tonight, that fear was beginning to lift. Mama Ngotsi walked slowly onto the veranda with Adaobi beside her. When she saw her son, she immediately understood. "It's over, isn't it?" Chukwudi smiled gently. "Almost." He climbed the steps and embraced her. "We found the truth." She closed her eyes. "I've been praying for those words." Superintendent Balogun approached Obinna, who had remained inside the library since Chukwudi left earlier that day. "Mr. Obinna Okafor." Obinna slowly stood. "I know why you're here." The detective nodded. "You are under arrest on suspicion of fraud, conspiracy, forgery, and criminal breach of trust. You have the right to remain silent." Obinna did not resist. Instead, he turned toward Mama Ngozi. Tears filled his eyes. "Auntie," she looked at him quietly. "I'm sorry. I know. I never wanted to become this person. No one does." He lowered his head. "I kept telling myself I could fix everything. But every lie required another lie." He nodded weakly. "Yes. I should have confessed long ago." She stepped closer. "I wish you had." Obinna looked toward Chukwudi. "I don't expect forgiveness." Chukwudi answered honestly. "Forgiveness and accountability are not the same thing." "I understand. You must answer for what you've done." "I will." The officers escorted him toward the waiting vehicle. Before entering, Obinna turned around one last time. "I'm grateful you came home when you did." Chukwudi looked at him silently. "If you had arrived one day later," he glanced toward the mansion, "there would have been nothing left." The vehicle door closed. As the convoy drove away, an unusual silence settled over the estate. It was not the silence of fear. It was the silence that follows the end of a storm. The following weeks passed quickly. Investigators arrested Chukwudi Ezeh 2 days later in a neighboring state. His testimony confirmed everything Victor Adewale had revealed. Soon afterward, international authorities located Samuel Kazim through financial records connected to the frozen overseas accounts. Millions of naira were recovered before they could be moved again. The stolen funds gradually returned to the Ezeh family trust. Forged property transfers were cancelled by the court. Every fraudulent contract was declared invalid. Barrister Emeka personally supervised the legal process until every family asset was restored. But the greatest victory had nothing to do with money. One bright Saturday morning, Chukwudi stood beside his mother outside the master suite. Workers had spent days restoring it exactly as it had been before. The old furniture had returned. His father's portraits once again decorated the walls. The reading chair stood beside the window overlooking the gardens. Even the small vase his mother loved had been placed back on its original table. Chukwudi handed her a familiar key. "It belongs to you." Mama Ngozi looked at it for several seconds before accepting it. "This is where your father wanted me to grow old. And this is where you will." She slowly unlocked the door. As she stepped inside, tears rolled gently down her face. "It feels like home again." Chukwudi smiled. "It always was." A few days later, he invited every employee of the estate to gather in the garden. Gardeners, drivers, housekeepers, security guards, cooks. No one was excluded. They stood quietly as Chukwudi addressed them. "I know many of you were frightened." Several employees lowered their heads. "I also know some of you wanted to help my mother, but feared losing your jobs." Adobe wiped away a tear. "I don't blame those who acted out of fear." He paused. "But from today onward, no one in this estate will ever be punished for protecting what is right." The employees applauded softly. He continued, "We will begin again." One by one, he thanked the workers who had shown kindness despite the pressure they faced. He thanked Ibrahim for buying medicine when Mama Ngozi had no money. He thanked Adobe for protecting the handwritten note. He thanked Grace for feeding a hungry stranger without expecting anything in return. When Grace was invited onto the stage, she looked overwhelmed. "I only gave her lunch." Mama Ngozi smiled warmly. "You reminded me that kindness still exists." Chukwudi then made an announcement that surprised everyone. "In honor of my parents, we are establishing the Chukwudi Ezeh Foundation." The crowd listened attentively. The foundation will provide legal assistance, food support, and emergency financial protection for elderly people who have been neglected or exploited by their own families. Mama Ngozi turned toward him with tears in her eyes. "You named it after me." He nodded. "Because everything good I have ever built began with your sacrifices." The applause grew louder. Months later, the foundation had already helped hundreds of elderly men and women across Nigeria. Some received medical treatment. Others recovered stolen property. Many simply found someone willing to listen to their stories. Mama Ngozi personally visited the foundation every week. She spoke with families. She prayed with widows. She reminded young volunteers that compassion was often more valuable than money. One peaceful evening, she and Chukwudi sat together in the garden, watching birds settle into the trees. The same garden where she had once stood alone in fear now echoed with children's laughter during community events organized by the foundation. "My son," she said quietly. "Yes, Mama." "Do you know what makes me happiest?" "The foundation." She smiled. "No." "Our home." She gently shook her head. "I'm happiest because you came home before your success changed your heart." Chukwudi smiled. "Everything I am came from you." She looked toward the sunset. "Never forget that wealth is safest in the hands of people who remember where they started." "I never will." She reached for his hand just as she had when he was a little boy. For a long while, neither of them spoke. They simply watched the evening sky together. The mansion behind them was no longer a place of fear. It had become a home again, and that was worth far more than every fortune the family had recovered. This story reminds us that the greatest betrayal often comes from those we trust most, but it also reminds us that truth has a remarkable way of finding the light. Wealth can build beautiful houses, yet only love, integrity, and respect can create a true home. Chukwudi's greatest victory was not recovering money or property. It was restoring his mother's dignity and protecting the values his parents had sacrificed to teach him. If this story touched your heart, share where you're watching from in the comments and tell us what lessons stayed with you the most. Your thoughts may encourage someone facing a similar struggle. And if you enjoy meaningful stories about family justice and hope, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next one.